out. So I'm going to turn it over to Joe. And Joe, you'll need to share your screen. And I'm going to mute myself, and you can just take it away and let me know if you need anything.
Okay, let me do that real quick and share my screen and share this one. Oh, let me get my questions over here. If anybody has any questions as I go through it, feel free to ask. And I want to thank Marlena and Josh for having me. It's always a pleasure to do any kind of an educational thing with the dates. Being teachers, it's always great to work with teachers who know what they're doing. So many people in this business don't have that background, so they just don't get it and they can't convey the information like they need to. If you have any questions for me, feel free to ask them in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. Just click on that and ask them. I'll try to answer them as I go through live as much as I possibly can. And I just want to let you know, tonight I'm going to be talking about never let a good crisis go to waste. That's an old quote from Winston Churchill. Supposedly he came up with that one. And he should know something about crises, going through World War II, leading a country that was being bombed daily. And I'm sure some days we feel like that in this to some extent. We feel like we're being bombed daily. Oh, I'm on the wrong screen. There we go. First of all, I want to give you a disclaimer. Of course, I am not your lawyer. I'm definitely not your CPA. I'm not your financial advisor. I'm not your spiritual advisor. And I'm not your psychologist. And every one of these people you need in your life. And another one that I didn't add there is coach. You definitely need a coach in your life to get you through. So everything I'm giving today, and you'll especially see this today, is definitely not a day of legal advice. I'm not giving any legal advice much today. What we're going to be talking about, I'm truly talking about how to prepare for the new normal, what's to come. Because that, I think, is a special skill set that we don't have. Most of us don't have because we've not worked on it and we've not had to flex this muscle in our brain. Fortunately, as a nation or as a human race, since 100 years, over 100 years ago, whenever we went through the last worldwide pandemic that was airborne, causing death with the Spanish flu. So it's going to be interesting to see how we do this. Tell you a little bit about who we are. Some of you, I've seen your names fly by. Some of you already know us, which is great. Great to see some friends and allies and referral sources on here. Of course, I'm a lawyer. I've been a lawyer I'm in my 24th year. Mostly practice only real estate law, real estate transactions as a subset of that, and also corporate transactions. We do a lot of formations of LLCs, corporations. Then we also do a lot of land trusts. But you'll notice that these three companies we have, the title agency and a land trust company, all sort of fit together in a mold to work together under one roof. So of course we have the title agency. Of course it handles closings, residential and commercial anywhere in Florida. And then we also have the land trust company that serves as trustee, land trustee anywhere in Florida for a lot of investors who buy their properties into a land trust, and they want to make sure that they're using a trusted third-party disinterested trustee who is not going to steal their property, encumber their property without permission, or otherwise take adverse action with that property. And being a lawyer, I have a lot at stake. I'm a licensed attorney in not only Florida, but North Carolina, South Carolina, and DC. I'm also a licensed real estate broker in North Carolina and Florida. I'm a licensed title agent in Florida and some other states. So I have a lot at stake. So I can't do anything with someone's property or their money without losing everything I have. And this is just one corner of what I have. But I would be letting down a lot of people if I did that. So I have way too much at stake to ever do that. And fortunately, there are some other lawyer-owned trustee companies in Florida. It's not just us, who I also have full trust and confidence in to handle being a land trustee in the state of Florida. Now, preparing for the new normal. I think Marlena did a great job I've given you some very specific tips about what you need to be thinking of right now whenever you're buying and selling properties. The vacation rentals, unless that's exactly what you're getting into, you don't mess with those. Retail, who's going to buy a retail space right now? A commercial even, maybe industrial. If you're a really big player, you can buy some big, dark, empty, 200,000 square foot warehouse space for maybe an Amazon or a Walmart distribution center or something like that. But I don't think most people are playing in that space. So we don't really recommend that for most people. But the new normal I'm talking about is whenever I'm going to be discussing tonight is how to prepare for what we have coming at us in the next 18 months to 2 years. Because that's really how long this is going to last. The projections I read this morning are that the recession that this is going to set off, or probably already has, will last until 2022 and be over at the earliest. And having been through several recessions, we understand what you're going to go through and what our investors see and what we see, what business owners in general will see, and how they have to grapple with that, how they have to do that. But before we can ever think about how we're going to prepare for the new normal, we have to think about our old normal and remember that. And I had this discussion this morning with an employee who had a relative die in Chicago, and texted me and said, "Hey, I'm going to take off and go to Chicago for the funeral." And we had to have a conversation about that, because people are not thinking in this new normal. They're still thinking that we can freely travel for vacations to go to funerals. We can hop on a plane with no problems and go wherever we want to go. They're thinking that we can freely congregate at a funeral even, or at a theme park. They still had that mindset. Our old normal, of course, is working away from home. We had kids, they went to school, they had daycare during the day. During the summer, they had day camps to go to. Our unemployment level was at 2.9%. We couldn't hire people because there was just no one to hire. And also Central Florida was growing by about 1,500 people a week as of last November. Last November, right before Christmas, during a holiday period, we were still growing by 1,500 new residents a week. And we were seeing a lot of Airbnb activity and rental tenancies and just a lot of real estate activity in general. And of course, now our present new normal is you leave home under penalty of death, just about. Literally, you go into the grocery store without a mask on and without washing your hands and taking off your shoes as soon as you get home. Is you think of that in the back of your mind as, well, this could be a death sentence for me to go to the grocery store. Families, sometimes multi-generations of families, are cooped up in the same house for days and weeks, maybe even months on end in some parts of the country. Unemployment, I've heard projections anywhere from 20 to 30% nationwide that will have people unemployed. That many people unemployed of the population. I also heard a projection that there could be 150,000 people who actually leave. We will actually reduce our population by 150,000 people. And of course, there's going to be lots of vacancies of all types, because if people leave, there's nobody to live here. If people aren't coming to theme parks, there's no one to stay in the hotels. If they're not coming to conventions, why do we have I think it's a 2 million square foot convention center with hotels ringing around it that stay closed all the time, with employees who just aren't there? And I think Marlena hit on it. I mean, she pointed out, you want to be working in an area where there's a population sufficient to support that business model of whatever real estate you're in. I think that Central Florida will still have that. I don't foresee it dropping below to such a level that real estate investing will not be viable in Central Florida anymore. with this many people leaving, of course, you're going to have a lot more supply of sales to demand. So, of course, when supply goes up, demand goes down. Of course, prices go down with it. So you're going to see that as well. But people have to start thinking in these terms, and we're even thinking about it internally of our working from home folks, because our employees who work from home go, I love it. I get so much more done. My kids are here. My family's here. I get to see them all day. And I'm just focused totally on work because there's nothing else I can do. And we had the conversation this week with our employees working from home because we're getting ready to start bringing them back to the office to work. And we said, think about it now. You think it's such a utopia working from home, but now think about it when the theme parks are reopened. Your family's at school and the house is just silent while you're there. There's no one else around to talk to. There's no one to have lunch with. There's no one to have dinner with. Think about that. Put that in your mind and think about that. So I'm no fortune teller, and I love Star Trek. So I've put here, damn it, Jim, I'm a lawyer, not a fortune teller. So that's a thing. I just love it. But I'm not a fortune teller. But I am here to help you prepare for the new normal. But I'm not going to tell you what it is because I don't know. I don't know that anybody knows exactly what the new normal is going to be. We can see trends. We can see where things are heading. Economically, every economist I've heard speak, they're all over the place. Of course, if you speak to the economist at UCF, he's never seen a problem with anything. Mr. Snaith out there, I've heard him speak several times, and we could be heading into a market crash, free fall across all sectors of the economy, and he would say, oh, everything's fine, it's going to be great. So different economists have different, and then there's the doomsdayer economist who says we're heading into the greatest of the Great Depressions we've ever had worldwide. There's going to be rioting in the streets and zombies crashing your house after dark. So different people have different takes on what this is going to be, and I'm not going to even try to tell you. Like I said, Marlene, I think, gave you some great tips, some great insight into what she's seeing in the market right now, and I think those were very prescient, very pertinent, and very, very informative. So I'll let her stick with those. But I'm going to talk about how we prepared for it and how we're coping with it moving forward so that we're always trying to be prepared for the new normal. And the first thing that I did, and it was around the end of, I think it was the end of February, mid-February, I took a trip to Italy. Not literally. I did not literally go to Italy. But in my mind, I went to Italy and I watched the news. And I'm a real news junkie. I was almost a journalist rather than a lawyer. So I love news and I love journalism, and I really seek out good journalism. And what brought it home to me was the CBS correspondent in Rome caught COVID-19 and put him, quarantined him in his house. And I saw him on Sunday morning, CBS News every Sunday morning, and what he was going through. And then I watched what was really going on in Italy and how bad it was. And then I saw it hit Spain. I saw it hit Greece, Germany, and I had seen it hit China because I watch the news every day. So yeah, as soon as I saw it hit Italy, I raised the alarms in my office to everybody who would listen to me. All of our referral sources, all of our clients I could talk to. I kept telling everybody, this is the United States in 2 weeks. This is where we will be in 2 weeks. And a lot of people, they put it off. They didn't want to hear it because it's bad news. They wanted to be the cockeyed optimist, as I say. They weren't being a realist. And I was trying to be a realist. I was trying not to be a pessimist. I was trying not to be an alarmist. But I was trying to be a realist. And the reality was Italy shut down from the north to the south. People were running from the north to the south to get away from the quarantines, just carrying the disease with them wherever they went. And I said, okay, people are going to come into, we've already seen it come into Washington. We've seen it come into New York. It's going to spread out from there. California shut down immediately, which probably saved that state a lot of heartache. New York couldn't get shut down fast enough. Florida didn't. We actually, at that point, we pulled our plan out. And being a title agency, we're required to have processes in place. We have a big book, a binder about this thick, and it's called the Alta 7 Pillars of Best Practices. And every title agency in the country, every law firm that does real estate closings is pretty much required to have this book. It's just one of the things that we have to have in place. And it is our book that we go to pull off the shelf of, this is the best practice of what we do when X is going to happen, or to prevent X from happening. So I said, hey, I've got a playbook on the shelf. Let me go pull it off and see what we've got. And I thought, well, what do I need to look at? We actually had an index. We had an index, and in that index was flu. It said, see pandemic. So I went to the pandemic section, which happened to be under the continuity of business plan. And we had there's a whole pillar of Title Association best practices dedicated to of business office. So the first week of March, coming into March, our office ran up hygiene. We could possibly get, we had to have it on hand. We put up signs all over the office. If you're sick, if you cough, if you feel bad, get out, go home now. We suspended our sick time leave. If you were sick, if someone in your family was sick, just don't come in. That's all we cared about. Just don't even. So we tried to prevent it from getting into our office, even closing at that point. We started pushing as many closed every time someone keys on to swipe everything down as soon as they left to sanitize the office again. So we followed our business continuity plan off the bat. Right there is what we did. We pulled out that business continuity plan and we followed them. So many people have plans like this sitting around and they don't follow them. Our next step of our plan of the business continuity was, we knew we were going to have to leave the office at some point. People were going to have to start working remotely. So we started working very quickly with our IT people. We ordered new laptops because we didn't have enough laptops. Everything was designed for people to sit in the office and work. We worked with our voice over IP phones, and we have offices in Richmond, Virginia, as well as Orlando, Florida, and a virtual office in Charleston, South Carolina, and another one in San Antonio, Texas. So we had to work with all of these people to figure out what we were going to do to make it to where our employees could work from home. So to come up with that, we played this thing called the constraint game. And that was our next step. And our employees, we would have meetings with them every day, everybody standing 6 feet apart, because we were already doing the 6 feet of separation. And we would tell them, imagine you don't have this. How are you going to handle it? And when we told everybody they're going to start working from home, immediately they started saying, well, I need a printer, I need a scanner, I've got to be able to print and scan. And I said, okay, here's a constraint. Today you have no paper. You don't have a copier, you don't have a printer, you don't have a scanner. All day today, no one is allowed to print anything, no one is allowed to scan anything, no one's allowed to throw anything on the copier at all for a day. Think of how you're going to handle that. And suddenly we quickly realized we needed better software, the electronic signing process, and use it even more than we are. We had to really dig in and act like that there was no paper left on the planet at all. So that's the kind of constraint exercises we work with. You know, what are the constraint exercises? You have to sit at your dining room table. You're happy. What are the issues? If your children are at home all day and you're having to homeschool them, how is that going to look for you? So we played imagination games too. So these were all to prepare us for the new normal that we are now in. So it's before, at least once before. Now, again, how did I do that? To me, news is prehistory. I know a lot of people right now, I've heard it so many times over the past few weeks. Just turn the news off. Don't about it. You've got to get away from it. Constant news people the time. So it's probably tough news and say, I will be blissfully ignorant, because you're going to miss what's going on. And so I watch the news every day. I mean, it's been said that journalism is history's first rough draft. That was Philip Graham. He used to be long time ago, he was the publisher of the Washington Post. And it's emblazoned in the old museum in Washington, D.C. But I believe that wholeheartedly, that whenever I read the news today, in 10 years or 100 years, that is going to be the history of what happened today and what's going to be happening and how we looked at it. So I watch the news and I eat it up, and I'm mostly looking for fortune telling, what's going to happen. Just the same way that I saw Italy 2 weeks away from us being Italy in 2 weeks, us being Spain in 2 weeks, us being New York in 1 week. Those are the things. And actually, I was surprised that Florida stayed open as long as it did, because I really expected Florida to shut down a lot earlier. But it actually kept on going for a week or two longer than I thought it would, based on what I had seen happen in other states and other countries where this had hit. But you also have to pay attention to history too. While you're trying to look forward, you also have to look back. So we've watched a lot of documentaries about the 1918 flu pandemic that hit the world, and how it went up, it dropped during the summer, and then it spiked almost twice as bad in the fall. We have new medicine now. We have a better understanding of science and viruses and things like that. So I'm not as concerned about us spiking as hard as we did back then, but we're preparing for it. We're preparing for another spike this summer or another spike in the fall. If it doesn't happen, great, but we're ready for it if it does. We are ready for our employees to go back to working remotely. We're ready for major upheaval in the real estate markets. We're ready for even more unemployment numbers to come at us. We're ready to not be able to travel for the rest of the year, at least, if it happens. And again, that all comes from watching the news of what's happening today, current events, but also watching what happened over 100 years ago, and how and how it played itself out through the world. And then you make a plan. You make a plan for, like we said, the worst case scenario, but you also make a plan for returning to the new normal. And that is the time now. If you don't have a plan. So we had a plan sitting on my shelf in a big, thick book that was already there. All I had to do is pull it off and read it and follow it. From what I understand, every state government, county government, and national government had a similar plan. All they had to do was go pull it off the shelf and start following it. I think a lot of people forgot that and didn't follow the plan. But if you don't have a plan, there's no time like the present to make it. Start making a plan today. And on the next slide, we'll discuss some tools on how you make a plan and how you get your mind ready for that, to do that. And also, again, a plan to return to the new normal. It's just like we've been talking to our employees who work from home. We've been talking to them about how reimagine now, again, that you're constrained that you're working from home, but your children aren't there, or some other constraint has been placed on you at for instance, the theme parks are open and now you can go to the theme park. The restaurants are open. You can go and have lunch or dinner anytime you want. Things like that. So we tell people to watch out, and think about these things. Are they still going to be as productive and happy working from home when that new normal hits? And then also I always recommend everybody stay flexible and agile. That's what we've tried to do. We've tried to stay flexible and agile, ready to change the plans. If we saw something wasn't working, we quickly tried to recognize that, tried to catch that. That comes through communication with each other, communication with employees, communication with your family members, and be willing to change your plans. Just because it's written down on a piece of paper doesn't make it carved in stone that you follow it. You have to adapt to situations that you didn't foresee. Some things that we didn't foresee were hardware failures. I had chairs that people are sitting in during the day that are just so uncomfortable that it's causing them pain. So we have to get new chairs to them, things like that. And you have to be willing to change your mindset. If you're not able to change your mindset, then this isn't to help prepare us for all this. Of course, we had the American Land Title Association, who was forced by the federal government through the CFPB to come up with their 7 pillars of perfection for title agencies to follow, just like banks have their pillars that they must follow for security and verification and business continuity. So we already have that, but there are some other things. And number one, I just want to throw it out there, is I've worked with coaches, meaning I've had a coach for my practice since 2000, I think it's about 2007, 2008. I've worked with coaches excel at. And our coach, the way I always put it out there is, imagine if you want to lose weight. There's different ways to do that. One is you can try to count your own calories and you can take your weight every morning and you can try to lose weight on your own. You may even buy a treadmill to put in your bedroom that becomes a very expensive clothes hanger for the rest of your life and never gets used. So you can try that. Or you can join a gym and maybe take some classes. That's a good step. Sort of like, going to seminars and with groups of people and getting a lot of information. You do get a lot of information that way. That's the way I learned a lot about nutrition and weight training, was when I was in college. I actually took a weight training class and had a real class, myself and 30 others, but that's how I initially learned it. Or you can hire a personal trainer, someone who's going to hold you accountable. They're going to talk to you about your food and nutrition. They're going to ask you about that weekly, at least. They're going to have you exercise, and you're going to feel compelled that you have to go because you're paying them for it, and you have to listen to what they say, and you have to do what they're telling you to do if you want to lose weight. Same thing in business, any kind of business. If you don't have a coach there to pull you along, you will always hit a plateau at some point, and you will think you know it, and you'll think, well, I read this book and I got it. I'm good. I read a book on it. I watched a YouTube video. I got it. We're good. So this is why I always encourage anybody, especially if you're new in real estate, or even if you've been in it for years. It's like somebody who's been going to the gym for years. They have gotten down to 165 pounds. They're happy at 165 pounds, but they can never get below that. They can't build the muscle. They're still getting flabby, and they just don't understand why. So they'll go to a coach for maybe 3 months, 6 months, or a year just to pull them out of that rut that they're in. And coaches are great for that. They'll force you to look within you, just like Marlena was talking about, and think about yourself and keep your own buckets full. So that's very important. So our coaches I've worked with, some different things that they've taught us over the years to think about. And one is, the very first thing that came to mind as I was putting this presentation together, was mindset. because that's the very first thing you have to do in preparing for the unknown, the new normal, the great unknown. And so Carol Dweck has written a book called Mindset. It's very simple. It's on Amazon. And again, you can read the book. It's very worthwhile to read it. I recommend everyone read it. But she talks about fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. And as you would expect, they're still thinking it's January, where why can't we go out to eat? Why can't I go to the theme park? And rather than just dealing with the reality in front of them, they're angry and confused and nervous, and they're paralyzed. Those people get paralyzed whenever faced with or confronted with upheaval and change, especially like we're facing now. And we even have it with some employees. I even face it myself sometimes. So you have to understand how your brain works. And there are a lot of books out there about how the brain works. But the best thing that we've learned is name it to tame it. And so I named, I don't think I really published this to everybody in our firms, but we named it pandemic planning. Whenever we saw this coming, we're like, okay, pandemic planning goes into effect now. Let's start moving forward with it. Once you name it, give it a name, you can tame it. We have a lot of snakes in our yard, and I'm deathly scared of snakes. And a lot of people who come to our house are deadly afraid of snakes. But we've learned that one of the things that we can do is whenever we see one of those snakes, we just name them. Oh, there's Jim, there's Bob. We've named that fear, and it tames it in our brain. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. But these are tools that I've learned over the years from my coaches of how your brain works so that you can control your thoughts to a large extent so they don't get away from you and you just lose it. Getting out of the whirlwind is another thing. If you're running the company, if you're expected to be the leader, if you're the leader of a team, a group, a crew, whatever you want to call it, if you're the leader, you cannot be down in the trenches day to day, every single day, preparing paperwork. You can't be cold calling. You can't be taking the calls from sellers and buyers. You can't be the one going on every inspection. So you have to find time for yourself as a leader to pull yourself out of a whirlwind and focus on your business. Focus on what's in front of you. And I've found that that's been very difficult to do, but I try to set time aside every single day. And lately it's been most of every day is set aside to work on the business rather than in the business. I'm very behind on a lot of projects for clients right now because of it, but we've held our companies together, and actually we've dropped in business, but it's not dropped as much as it could have. A lot of our competitors are probably just not going to survive this because their leaders are having a hard time getting out of the whirlwind to focus on cash flow, staffing issues, technology issues, future issues just like this of where are we going to be in 1 week, 2 weeks, a month, 3 months, a year from now? Where are we going to be? What do we have to do? I can't tell you how many businesses missed the SBA payroll protection program simply because they weren't paying attention to the news. They were too busy just running around aimlessly. And instead of trying to focus on getting that money, making that their number one priority, they waited too late. They didn't go to the right banks. They didn't take advice. And they missed that first round. So now they're hoping that they get into the second round. We got in on the first round with our bank, partly because we have a great relationship with our bank. Our banker called us and told us about it and got us into it very quickly. Kaizen is probably a term that a lot of you have heard. That means little changes. And the problem is you can change your mindset. You can pull yourself out of the whirlwind, and then you can name these problems. You can name these fears to tame them, but they're huge. And suddenly you look at it as the fire hydrant is going to drown me as I stand here because I can see that. So Kaizen is an exercise that we are constantly trying to do. And the first question is, okay, what is the smallest thing I can do right now? And it may be, oh, I need to send an email to someone. That's still not the smallest thing I can do. What's the smallest thing I can do? Well, I guess I can open my Outlook to prepare the email. Nope, that's still not the smallest thing you can do. What's the smallest thing you can do? I can sit down at my desk. That's the first thing I can do. I can sit down at my desk. Then I'm going to open my computer. And you start breaking everything down into these very small steps. And with these small steps, these small little things that you do that are much easier for your brain to comprehend and your brain to handle, because it's not the big scary lion coming at you out of the jungle. It's just the field mouse crawling on the ground. You can actually move forward through accomplishing a lot of very, very, very tiny steps, very tiny changes. So we focus a lot on Kaizen in our office, especially at the leadership level, of what's the smallest thing I can do right now to propel this idea forward. What can I do right now? We also use the Full Focus Planner. I'll pull it out right here. It's a book. It's called the Full Focus Planner. Each book holds about 3 months, and it's sort of a journal that you follow every day. Now, if anybody knows me, I'm completely paperless, except for this. This is the only thing I still use paper for every day. And I read it, and I write in it in my own handwriting and make it my idea of what to do. So that is how that works. And then, so we focus on the Full Focus Planner. It keeps, again, it breaks everything down every single day. I have 3 goals I have to get done every single day. I have rewards that I'm going to give myself when I accomplish some of the big goals. But everything is to propel forward to the next goal. And usually we have about 10 goals to accomplish every single quarter. That book is just 1 quarter. And so you go through one book every single quarter and you keep up with it every single day to keep yourself moving forward. So we also use that. That was from our coaches. But the big thing is sort of the Stockdale paradox. And some of you have heard me talk about this. It's Admiral Stockdale. He was the highest ranking member of the armed services who was made a prisoner of war in Vietnam. And he also had the highest number of soldiers who survived under his command while in the POW camps in Vietnam. And somebody asked him, well, how do you do that? And he said, well, you always stay focused. I'm paraphrasing. You stay focused on reality. You never lose hope that you will persist and succeed. And somebody said, oh, so that means you're always an optimist. He said, nope, the optimists always died first. They died of broken hearts and broken dreams. He said, well, then you become a pessimist. And they said, nope, the pessimists also died pretty quickly because they died of worry and concern. So you just try to be a realist. You focus on what's actually happening. And that, to me, my touchstone for that is watching the news once in the morning and once at night to see what's happening, not here, not just here. I want to see what's going on in Italy, but I'm also watching Wuhan, China right now. I want to know how they're handling this in Wuhan as they reopen their businesses. What kinds of things are they doing to prepare them to open their businesses? What are consumers expecting? What are consumers seeing? And what does it look like in Wuhan, China today? That's the kind of things I'm looking at to see what it's going to look like here in Florida in another month or 2, and in New York and the rest of the United States. Again, constraint planning. This is what I was talking about, how we imagine no more paper, no more copiers, no more scanners. There's a great TEDx talk on YouTube by artist Phil Hansen. It's called The Power of Constraints. And he's an artist. And one of the things that he did one day, he's like, well, I want to see how much art, what kind of art I can create if I take things away. What if I don't have paint one day? What if I only have toilet paper? What if my hand shakes a lot while I'm painting? He kept putting constraints on himself. And the thing that he learned is it brings out creativity by forcing those constraints, either real or imagined, on yourself in a business or as an artist. It forces you to be creative. And and you got to just let your imagination flow to the absurd. I mean, when I'm sitting thinking about where we're going to be in 3 months, I have to force myself. Imagine if Disney does not open the rest of the year. Imagine if schools stay closed the rest of the year through 2020. Imagine if we all have to work from home and only essential workers can go out. What happens if essential workers are also forced to stay home? So I start thinking of right now it sounds absurd. 2 months ago, at the end of February, when I was talking to my staff about this, when I was talking to referral sources and clients about this, they thought I was being absurd. I said, imagine if you can't go anywhere. You're stuck in your house for 2 months, 3 months. And they would say, that's absurd. And I'd say, Wuhan, China, right now, that's exactly what's happening. I never thought that we would be as authoritarian as they are, which fortunately we weren't. But I presumed that we would be there, and absurd as it sounded then, here we are. So experiment with constraints on yourself, your family, and your coworkers. Force yourself for a day, even a few hours, these constraints that you have to have. As a wholesaler, imagine that you're never allowed to go and physically inspect a house again. Imagine that you're never allowed to let a buyer ever walk into a house again to see the inside of it. How are you going to ever wholesale that house? How are you going to deal with that? Just imagine these things in your mind. Come up with these constraints on yourself, and then what you'll find is efficiency will grow out of that. And one of the things I've learned in this economy, efficiency is the new currency. I listened to a great economist the other day, and he was talking about it. A lot of people are worried because the government is just shooting money out, trillions of dollars out like a cannon. And everybody's worried, oh no, we're going to have inflation like they have in Venezuela, where they have to carry a load of money in a wheelbarrow just to buy a loaf of bread or whatever. And this guy he had some interesting thoughts. He said, that's probably not going to happen in the United States simply because we innovate. We become more efficient about what we do. So instead of we can't raise a hot dog to the price of $50 for a hot dog. But what we can do is we've still got demand, and we've still got 300 people who we have to sell more of those hot dogs. Is how we have, at $1 a piece is how we have to do it. So we become more efficient. We develop hot dog cookers that'll cook 300 hot dogs at a time and things like that. So we become more efficient so we can keep the prices down and still serve a larger number of people. So as wholesalers, as real estate investors, you have to constantly be thinking about, how can I be more efficient? What is something I can do here that would make me more efficient and able to do this under the constraints that are being placed on me externally by the world right now? What am I going to do? Gratitude is another one of our touchstones. It's also part of our values as a company, across all our companies. In fact, every employee we hire, we make them write a thank you note as part of their hiring process. Before anyone ever speaks to them live, we have them write a thank you note to someone and seal it up in an envelope and sign it. And then after they're done, we read their thank you notes. Because what we have found is when you are in that heightened state of confusion, when you feel like the world is falling down around you, gratitude is another tool that you have. When you understand the brain, you understand there's the amygdala and there's the frontal cortex. The amygdala, we used to have a friend who was a Navy SEAL, and he always called that his lizard brain. And I remember one time, the way he explained it, we were walking by a hotel, and there was a man standing up about 10 stories up on a hotel balcony over the beach, and he was talking through a megaphone. It was a walk for ALS that we were working on, that we were walking in, and he looked up. This big, burly, retired Navy SEAL, and then he had seen some stuff in his life. And he looks up at this guy on the 10th floor balcony, and he says, "I could never do that." And I said, "What do you mean you could never do that? Talk to a large group of people?" He said, "No, I can't stand on the 10th floor balcony looking down." I said, what in the world are you talking about? I said, "Didn't you ever have to jump out of a plane at nighttime from over 10,000 feet?" He said, "Oh yeah, I did that all the time." And he said, "But that's my lizard brain in the airplane." And the lizard brain he was talking about is his amygdala. The amygdala is what tells us fight or flight. It's the part of our brain that kept us alive when we were just scurrying around the jungles and lions and tigers were out to eat us. That is the part of our brain that tells us run away or stop and fight. So it can keep you, at an agitated state at all times because you're just wondering, am I going to fight somebody or am I going to run away? And that's not a good state to be in. It's hard on you physically. It's definitely hard on you emotionally and mentally. So you have to, again, name it to tame it. And he had named it his lizard brain. So he knew that when he was jumping out of the plane, his frontal cortex, his thinking brain, would overpower his amygdala and force him to jump out of that plane because it would tell him, your parachute's going to open, you're going to land, you're going to be safe, you've done it 1,000 times, you'll be fine. Don't worry about it. But on the 10th floor, that thinking brain cannot overcome the amygdala because he's just high enough up to where I can fall right over this thing, I don't have a parachute on, and I'm going to die. So that's what he was talking about. But he had named that lizard brain to tame it. He had tamed his lizard brain as a Navy SEAL. And everyone should understand that, and they should be able to spot that when they're getting into that. So one of the ways that you can help when you catch your lizard brain trying to overtake your thinking brain, your smart brain, when you're not thinking clearly, you're caught up in that whirlwind, you're caught up in worry, dangers, regret. It's right over the horizon. What am I going to do? Oh my gosh, I've just lost my job. My wife just lost her job. My kids are staying at home all day and I've got to, be the teacher now and all this other stuff. The thing that we recommend is first you stop, you take a breath or 2 or 3 or 4. I always like the 4 seconds up, hold 4 seconds, 4 seconds down, hold 4 seconds. And I do that about, it depends on the situation, but I can do it up to 10 times easily. And that will calm you down, number 1. Number 2, smile. Smiling changes your entire attitude. Even if someone's screaming at you or whatever may be going on, smiling is going to help. And then write down 3 things that you have overcome in the past 2 weeks. We went through this exercise last Friday with our coaches, writing down as many things as we had overcome since this pandemic hit in our businesses and in our lives, emotionally, physically, mentally, everything, spiritually, everything. We wrote it down, everything that we had overcome. And once you write down all those things you have overcome, then you think about all the people or the things that helped you make that happen. And then you write those people and things down that you're thankful for. For us, it's been webcams and laptops and a nice office, fortunately, at home that we can work from. Things like that, coaches, things like that. And whenever you stop and do all that, suddenly you get the confidence back to look back at this, whatever was overwhelming you before you started this. And you go, okay, I got through those. How can I make this situation great? And we do this with our employees all the time. If an employee comes to us and they're BMW driving, we call it BMW driving. They're bitching, moaning, and whining. They're BMW driving. We have to stop that quickly because that will spiral down, becomes a huge emotional toll, a mental toll, and also takes a lot of time. C.Y. Wakeman, she has written a great book called No Drama, and it's about drama in the workplace. And Cy has done a lot of research and work on how much time is wasted on drama in the workplace. And we saw that happen here. With the pandemic coming, a lot of our employees were BMW driving about, well, now I've got to take my computer home. I'm not going to be able to come into work. I have no separation between work and home anymore. My kids are there. I don't know, what am I going to do? And we have to start as leaders. As leaders, it's your job to helping them re-engage. So smile. Ask them to take a breath. Hey, take a breath. Smile for me. Now, what can we do to make this great? What can we do to make this situation great? Because at that point, whenever they're in the BMW driving mode, it's actually their amygdala, their fight or flight, and they're fighting. Their fight or flight is in high gear. And the only way you shut that amygdala down is you've got to engage the front of your brain, the thinking brain. You've got to get yourself, and you got to get whoever you're leading, whoever you may be coaching, you've got to get them thinking. So a great question to stop that amygdala in its tracks is to go, okay, what are the facts? What exactly do we know? And if they start talking about a lot of opinions, well, this guy's a jerk. He won't call me back. This seller's crazy. This buyer's crazy. Okay, but what are the facts? Well, this buyer is in New York and they can't travel and they can't get a notary to them. Okay, how will we make this great? What ideas do you have that would make this great? How can I help you to make this great? Those are some questions you can stop and ask. But if you haven't started from a position of gratitude in the first place, you're thankful that you have those crazy buyers and sellers. You're thankful that you have this employee or co-worker standing with you here to help talk through this process with. If you don't start with that gratitude so that you can pull yourself out of the whirlwind, if you can't name that fear, that amygdala going crazy, that lizard brain taking over your thinking brain, then you're just going to spiral into that BMW driving with them. You're never going to move forward, and you're not going to be able to process, plan for, and deal with the new normal, whatever that may be. So that's the challenge I would give everybody, is deal with the normal we have now as a realist. Be realistic about it. This is what we have. Don't be a pessimist. Don't be an optimist. Just go, okay, these are the facts. This is where we are right now. And Marlena was putting a bunch of them out there. It's great. I love hearing them. Why would I buy a vacation rental down at Disney right now? Unless that is part of that's what I do. I handle vacation rentals, and I can get some really good deals right now. And when the market does come back, I will have gotten them at pennies on the dollar. And I've got enough cash. And be realistic about your cash flow. This is one of the things that we do. I used to look at cash flow once a month, maybe once a quarter, because I have people in the office that's really their job. It's become my job now. I've made it my business to look at cash flow every single week. Now the person who used to look at it every week looks at it daily, sometimes by the hour. They're watching cash flow. They're working on PPP grant applications, although that's taken care of now. They're working on anything that they can to prepare us for the next 3 months or 6 months, so that we're not sitting there worried about cash flow. And if you don't have that person in your office, then that's you, and that's your job. So tame it. The cash flow performance index, cash flow crammer, whatever you got to call it. I got to do my cash flow cramming today, and I got to deal with that. So name that fear, face it head on and deal with it, and know what you've got and move forward. Right now, just some basics of what we're seeing in the market right now. Of course, yes, Marlene is right. We are still seeing a lot of wholesaling. What we're hearing from our wholesalers is they are going back and getting a lot of concessions and price reductions from the buyers, depending on how long ago the contract was entered. They are going back. We're seeing a lot of title defects. A lot of problems are coming up now for some reason. A lot of people were actually in foreclosure before this happened. I don't understand, that. It's usually the normal situations: divorce, medical bills, something like that. So we're still seeing those. I get to see price reductions even more. So if you're a wholesaler, it's always been said, if you're not embarrassed to make the offer, then you're offering too much. And the longer you're in it, the harder it is to embarrass you to make the offer. So we're going to see, I think, definitely prices going down. We're watching population trends with Disney, Universal, SeaWorld, and the convention center all closed down. Our airport is working. It used to handle, I think, 70 to 80 million passengers a year. Right now, They're expecting that to be about 10% this year of that overall amount. So that just says right there, tourists aren't coming in. We expect tourism to not come back for at least a year, because think about it, most people who come to Disney, that's at least a 1 to 2 year plan before they can afford to do it. We will see an uptick in drive-to tourists coming in before we see the fly-to, because again, flying takes a lot more planning, especially if they're coming from overseas. A lot more planning, a lot more money, a lot more cash set aside to do that. From what we've heard, most reservations have been canceled through July for most people. So if this doesn't pick up by August, you're probably going to see nothing in tourism this year. We won't have a peak this year. If anything, we'll have a drop. Down Southwest Florida, my friends that I have down there who practice down there are saying the same thing. They will not have a season down there at all. So that is part of the new normal that we are trying to wrap our minds around, of what if no one's buying houses. But by the same token, we're thinking of all these people who have been cooped up in houses that have been too small, but they've been able to deal with it because the kids go to school every day and the parents go to work, and they're only there for a few hours each night and then on the weekends. Now that they've been cooped up together in a small house for months on end, the people who can afford it will be looking to move to larger houses with larger yards, so that when or if the next peak comes, they will have room to spread out. Multi-generational housing, I was talking about this today with someone. I don't know if that is going to be as popular as it once was, especially the way that this virus has treated the older population compared to the younger population, and required quarantines inside of quarantines. So, and it's spread within the house very quickly. So I don't know if a lock-off mother-in-law suite will be more popular in homes, but we're definitely seeing that as a potential for people going forward, looking for houses where they can literally lock the house off and cordon it off from different sections, so that the kids, the grandparents, everybody else can really have their own living spaces away from each other. And some imagination exercises that we're playing out right now among ourselves in our office is, again, we're imagining the absurd. Imagine if Disney, Universal, and SeaWorld and the hotels never open again. What is Central Florida going to look like? I don't think it'll come to that, but we could definitely imagine it not opening for another 10 months. And how is that going to look for our businesses? How is that going to look for the housing market? Will this be a good time if you've got cash to pick up assets? Because that's what most people do. In a bad time, they buy up assets. And that can be houses, that can be cryptocurrency, that can be gold, it can be stocks, it can be anything. Buy low, sell high. So this may be a time when a lot of people use their cash. But again, a lot of people like us, we're watching our cash reserves and ensuring that we always have enough there to do it. So use those, put those artificial constraints on yourself, name your fears, name them to tame them. And I think that will help you out a lot. There's my contact information. Marlena, if you want, I will stop sharing now and you can take over. I see John says here that he's definitely playing the what if game a lot, and how they're going to handle it. And definitely a great idea. Definitely a great idea.
I'm back.
Cool.
Yeah, does anybody have any questions? All right, well, I don't see anything, but feel free to raise your hand if you do. Oh, there's somebody's chatting. The website link is giving a 404 error. Okay, that's the one with the docs kit, is that correct?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, I will fix that when we get off of here. But if you just email Joe directly if you want to do that right now, because that's where the link on the website goes. So you can just do joe@seaglelaw.com and just let him know that you're through here.
Yeah.
So, well, awesome. Joe, thank you so much for taking the time to do this with us this evening. It's been super exciting being able to connect with you and be able to connect with everybody in REI Live Orlando world. We're going to try and do more of these coming up. has been a little bit, taking one step at a time, seeing what's going to be going on with the economy and if we're allowed to meet and that sort of thing. But it's great that we can do virtual stuff, and we're going to be doing more of it. So if anybody has any suggestions or questions or anything that you'd like to see us cover in future events, then please reach out and let us know. info@reiliveorlando.com. You can check us out on the Facebook page. Of course, you can reach out to Joe as well. You got his contact information. And in the next 30 minutes or so, I'll make sure that that link is working if it's not functioning for some reason. It was working before we started. I tested it, so sorry about that.
Yeah.
But all right, and let me double check here. Okay, you got it. Okay, thanks, John. This was great. Glad to hear that. All right, well, if nobody else well, we got maybe a Q&A.
The bad link.
Okay, the link is bad. Okay, yeah, I'll work on the link, guys. Thanks for letting me know. I appreciate that. Hope you all have a wonderful evening, and we will stay in touch in the near future and let you know what our next event is going to be. So thank you all again for showing up here this evening. Thank you, Joe, for taking the time out to do this with us. And we hope everyone has a wonderful evening. Thank you, Jenny.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.